This session is a discussion of Chapter 7 for Psych 241, Early Childhood, Physical and Cognitive Development. This module has, I think, 4 chapters in it, so it's important that we kind of move through these. I will give you a basic understanding of the data in here, and I will highlight some of the key slides that you may need to set aside for your studying and or when you take your quizzes and your papers. Okay, so let me go into it. And also, if you have any questions, please email me. You can contact me via Remind, or you can contact me and we can set up a Zoom meeting to talk about some concepts, especially when it starts getting into your final project. I think we'll cover a couple of those topics today. So anyway, here we go. So let me go back. So learning outcomes, we're going to learn about physical development, motor development, certain illnesses, sleep patterns, and elimination disorders. Kind of interesting concept there. PSY, cognitive development, which is the PSY aspect, theory of the mind, okay, memory development, and language development. There's a lot of growth patterns initially. There's a chart that's kind of hard to read, but it really just talks about the continuous. There's continuous and discontinuous. This is a continuous growth pattern of children. Yeah, we have certain jumps but the jumps, as we smooth out the averages, are pretty minimal in terms of their changes. You may grow 6 inches over a summer, but then it doesn't impact the total average too much. So anyway, these are a couple of charts that can give you a sense of where growth takes place. Okay, when the brain, so the brain is developed first in the prenatal aspect, so it can control a lot of the rest of the aspects of the growth. So part of it, as you're born, your brain is usually a little bit big. Usually babies have big heads, and we kind of grow into it. So at 2 years, the brain is 75% of its adult weight. So it's almost completely adult by the time it's 2 years old. At 5 years, it's 90%. So after 5 years, the brain is as big as it's ever going to get. Now the fibers can change and the nerve cells can change, things like that within the brain, but it kind of works that way and stays about that size. Okay. Left and right hemispheres. So there's ideas about left and right brain hemispheres in terms of artistic on the right and on the left, and then artistic on the right, and mathematical or calculations on the left. There is some truth to that still, but a lot of it is that the brain develops so dramatically that it can overcome anything. If you get a damage somewhere, it will modify itself to overcome whatever function that needed to occur. In many cases, some cases it can't. But, so the idea of the corpus callosum is like cable fibers. Just think of cable in terms of your TV cable or something like that run and connect the two sides of the brain. They're right kind of in the middle of it, and they can control if that is severed for some reason, then you lose part of your functionality. And because sometimes it does require a communication across the area, because for example, your hearing occurs on your left side of your brain. It's on the back of the left. So if you get it severed, then you may not be able to hear nearly as well, or may only be able to hear in one ear or something like that. But the corpus callosum, it does that communication process for you. So plasticity is when something happens, like a damage or something, or even just in development, and your brain will take up the functions in other parts of your brain. It will do that somewhat, not in every case and not completely 100%, but it will continue to try to develop and modify itself and transform itself as years go along to help it so you can maintain all the functionality you need to have. So motor development, gross motors, large muscles, it helps you walk, things like that. Those occur first, okay? And they're very similar in terms of boys and girls as we grow up. This is kind of a table of what happens with your gross motor skills. We're not going to go through it all, but kind of get an idea. This would be a good chart to have when you take your quizzes, just because there'll be things on the quiz that might ask you, and when does such and such occur, like walking upstairs. When is this one child able to walk upstairs? And so those are some things you might want to keep available. Um, Physical activity. So rough and tumble play actually helps. Parents get upset because someone's going to get hurt or someone's going to break something or things like that. But if it occurs outside, especially in the grass or something like that, that's pretty safe. Um, it actually is a good thing to happen because it helps the development. And what happens when you notice in rough and tumble play, and I don't mean beating people up, but I mean just kind of wrestling around and stuff, you're required to move your muscles at different rates in different angles at different times. And so it helps develop that process. Parents that are physically active, get down on the floor and play with kids, um, help quite a bit, and they help the physical activity of the children. So if you are able to do that, my mom used to do it all the time with us. I don't know why, but my dad really didn't do it too much, but usually that's the male role, but doesn't have to be. Could also be older siblings. It helps the child as well. So, but parents would be the best thing. Fine motor skills, those occur a little bit later. Those are like the pinchers. They are if you can pick up a pencil, it says here, or it's your pointer finger, and your thumb working together to pick things up. That's when you start getting into the finer motor skills, and little babies can't do that, and probably not until you get certain ages where they can actually stack blocks. That's why it's good for them to have these things to do. It seems like it's a real waste of time to stack blocks, and the kids get excited about it. But they're developing their motor skills. It's not just a game, not the silly thing to do, but it actually helps them develop their skills. Um, Artistic development, kind of interesting. It both is something that has to do with motor development and cognitive skills. So it has to be able to work together, and that occurs a little bit later. So you can, when young people just grab a crayon for time, they'll take a red crayon and cover the whole page, and they think they've done it. Well, in their brain, maybe they have, but after a while, what starts happening is is the placement of it. So where they color, if it's shaped like a circle or a square, start to design things, put a couple shapes together, and actually create a picture. When we create the picture, we all have different shapes. We create a house that's triangular. We create a sun up in the upper right corner with yellow rays coming out of it, but we can draw a tree or something like that. That's this last part here. That takes both fine motor skills and cognitive skills to be able to do that. Okay, so none of these developmental theories work separately. They all work together. That's why the complexity within our brains is so incredible. Um, Handedness. You can usually tell a child has right or left-handed early on. Um, Most kids have a preference for right hand. As you know, most people are right-handed. There are some parents that want the child to grow up left-handed, and they will begin the process of training them. Even though the child might genetically engineered to do right-handed, you can train your child to be left-handed. It also is a way, especially when you think about it in baseball or softball, especially being left-handed is a big advantage, and certainly is an advantage sometimes in baseball as well. So many times when children learn how to swing a bat, uh, their parents or their coaches will teach them both ways. And early on, that's an easy process to do. To try and do that at high school level is a little more a challenge, but it still can be done. It's just a learning process that has to be done. But handedness is something that definitely occurs early on. You hand someone a bottle or a cookie or a cracker, and you'll see what hand they reach out with. Most of the time is what hand they become. So nutrition, it's about calories and balanced diets and those kind of things. It's kind of important, but the calories can be important because usually babies are kind of pudgy little chubby things, and they tend to lose their weight fairly quickly in their first year. So they need the proteins and fruits and vegetables and all that kind of stuff going forward. But anyway, that's kind of a quick nutrition thing. Most of us have had nutrition, and that kind of ties into it. Minor illnesses, simple things like we get a cough or a cold, or sometimes even the flu can be a minor, depending on what season is and what it is. But certainly, sometimes fevers, infections, and stuff like that, all part of things that we should be able to heal with, maybe without even going to the doctor. Okay, some over-the-counter medications, or sometimes just rest and it goes away. Major illnesses are things that are we can't. You just have to go to the doctor. Usually, it's pneumonia. Excessive diarrhea can be a real problem for especially young kids because they may not drink enough, and so they get dehydrated. Measles, tetanus, whooping cough, tuberculosis. So some of these are in the vaccines that we take. And it's important that we do get our children vaccinated. And I know there's a lot of anti-vaxxers that are out there, and they have this sense that they cause autism, things like that. It really doesn't. There's no evidence that shows it does that. But there was certainly a campaign a while ago to do that. So vaccines are really important. If otherwise, I don't know, I mean, to me, it's not being fair to your child, giving them a chance. Respiratory infections are some that occur from fossil fuels, and so you get carbon monoxide sometimes that occurs out of fossil fuels and things like that. So those are things that we want to try to avoid. Diarrhea, we've talked about. Lead exposure. Lead used to come in paint when we were house paint. Lead can lead to some major problems. Breathing in dust from it there. If you tap water with lead, lead, like that's that Flint, Michigan thing about it. It's lead in the tap water. It can cause neurological damage, and that can be a real problem going forward. Motor accident, that's the most common cause of death in early childhood. A lot of it is because, especially poor children, it might be different. Cars are different quality, cars have different structure. It could even be seat belts and quality of seat belts. It could be that maybe a poor family can't afford the baby seats as they get older. Maybe the little one is, so they get into the seat belt before they're ready, and some of those injuries occur because of that. But it is the most common cause of death in early childhood from children are motor vehicle accidents. Boys more than girls. I looked it up. I couldn't find that reason why. It just seems maybe this goes up and maybe they tend to be out of their seats more. I don't know what that is, but I wasn't quite sure why that said that. But that's what it says in the book, so I haven't been able to find that research yet. Sleep. So different frightening dreams that occur. You can usually tell. You can watch your baby's face and you can see their eyes moving. Usually means they're in their REM sleep. When they're calm and quiet, that means they've moved on beyond that and they're more into a deep sleep. Sleepwalking occurs sometimes, usually older, of course. Might get out of their beds. It can occur occasionally, or it can be a real problem where it can occur quite a bit. And so that's something that you kind of need to deal with and need to be able to know. There's all kinds of things about don't wake a child up, and that kind of stuff. I don't know if there's any really set rule on those. Maybe there is. I don't know, and someone can share that. But certainly sleepwalking is something that if it occurs very infrequently, not a big deal. If it's frequently, then maybe there's some work that needs to be done to help the child out. Elimination disorders. These are waste products. So this is something. You can go back to your Freudian stuff about the anal stage. This is something that kind of occurs at that children who don't let toilet training occur, who don't learn toilet training, they have problems later. Problems in terms of going too often or not going enough. Okay, so let's go into that in a little bit here. So this is about bedwetting, and many of us may know someone who is a bedwetter. It's not something people would usually make fun of someone. Usually there's either a psychological or physical problem associated with it. And it's really kind of a sad thing because young kids who are bedwetters may never get to go to a friend's house and sleep over. They would have trouble going on camping trips, things like that, like for Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts. Or Girl Scouts or whatever, or even family ones, like mixed families. It's really kind of a tragic, sad thing, and there's a lot of reasons for it that need to be addressed. So it actually can get to a point where it can stop. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's emotional. There are times for people that sleep so soundly that they don't feel they have to go, and they just end up going in their sleep. And there's nothing wrong with them other than the fact that they need to be able to have to remind them to check and see if they have to go to the bathroom. Okay, so anyway, I'll get too much into that, but that's kind of bedwetting thing. It is kind of a sad thing. So people that make fun of people who are bedwetters, I don't think that's really a good thing. Okay, lack of bowels. This is kind of the same thing at the other end, so to speak, or chronic constipation. Okay, these if someone really has harsh punishment, like I said, they dirty their pants, and they really shouldn't be, and the parents are kind of mad because it's out at a party, and now they got to take time and change the baby's diaper, and they get all mad and everything like that. Maybe even spank the baby. That can lead to some of these things where it's either extensive soiling, or it could be someone who is so constipated that they end up making themselves sick. Okay, so with cramping and those types of things. So anyway, those are kind of some issues that go on. So PSY, so this is the second stage that it has, and it's pre-operational. So these are the ability for them to manipulate symbols, to be able to create things in their mind that are not really there, primarily in play. Play is a big area. So they may be having a little party where they have friends over, and they have a make-believe friend, and they have a stuffed animal, and they have their good friend or a brother or sister there, and they're pouring coffee or Coke or tea into a cup. My dog carrying through me, right? That's all about. Anyway, so and so they pretend there's tea in there, or they pretend there's other things, or they're down the ground playing with their trucks or playing with the cars and stuff, and they have make believe make this whole make up world. That's what it's about when they start being able to develop that. Okay. Sorry, my dog is carrying through here. Okay. So so this is kind of what we talked about a little bit there. Got to be in the second year. It's called pretend and play. They can make up things. They can be the school teacher. They can, be whatever, that kind of stuff. Egocentrism is when they put themselves at the center, and they really have trouble understanding what other people see, notice, or feel. Everything is about them. Certainly, some adults never get out of that either. But it's about them. They don't understand. They don't understand if even if they know you're looking at something different or you're experiencing something differently, they don't accept your point of view, and they don't deal with your point of view. Okay, so it's all about them and how they feel and think about things. Sorry, dog again. So here's different casualties. Cause and effect, pre-causal and transductive reasoning. This is where the natural cause and effect relationship. So that's when friends leave, move on, things like that. That can be really difficult for younger people when they get older. It's difficult still, but they tend to believe that these things kind of happen going forward. So those are kind of those issues there. This is when they would be, a bear, stuffed bear could be an animal, a person. Their dog can be a person, and they even deal with that. And this is artificialism is kind of it's a funny term. It's about this is an environmental patterns were designed made by people. There's actually quite a bit of evidence that shows that people influence it. Whether they are started or created by people, I think is still something that's kind of out there. But certainly, there's enough evidence to show that we, as human beings, certainly are adding to our environmental issues today. So pre-operational children have difficulty making distinctions between mental and physical effects. Okay, so they get confused about things. They think that something. If you tell them that their stuffed animal walked away, they would struggle with that. Not say it's not true. You as an adult, your animal can't walk. They know that they've made that a human being at times, and it can do that, but they kind of get confused over those different aspects of it. So egocentrism, as I said before, their thinking directly reflects what the reality is, and even though it may be very far from the reality, what their thoughts are. Okay. Again, as you know, some of that's still happening in adults, but it is something that certainly is there in young children. In conservation, the best way to explain it, I think, is this next one right here. The conservation of mass, there's just some videos about this, and maybe you guys have seen these, is you take two beakers, and they're the same, show the child, they're the exact same height, exact same width, exact same beakers, and put the water in. Then you take this graduated cylinder, which is skinnier and taller, okay? And the child watches you take the water from here and pour it into here, and now you ask them which one. So you ask them here, which one has the most? Well, they're the same, okay? Then you do this. You pour the exact same water, and they watch you do it. And now you ask which one's the same. They say this one's more. Well, why? Because it's higher, okay? So that's what we do understand conservation of mass. And those of you taking chemistry and stuff, you understand that it's always consumed. Your chemical equations have to balance. You always have the same amount of mass or moles on each side. A little more much for this young person right here, but that's conservation of mass, conservation of art. But they can't understand that idea very well. So inclusion, trying to have trouble focusing on two aspects at once, which means that for them to focus on whether someone is their race and their gender at the same time is pretty difficult. They may only want to play with girls, okay? And so they only see that you're a girl, they don't really care what race you are. They may, because of some cultural influences, only want to play with other black or white children, and they will not care what your gender is. So that's kind of what's happening this day. Now, this is that 2 to 4 age, okay? So there's really a lot of confusion going on in that stuff, and they don't really see color as much. They don't understand color, I guess, but they may see a difference in it, okay? Same with gender. They don't really understand what makes a boy and a girl, but they notice that there are boys and girls in the world, okay? And they deal with that in a different way. Cognitive development, scaffolding is when you build on it. You build like scaffolds. You build on, and you give them something, and you build on it. It's like if you were doing, let's say, a math problem. You kind of build on, okay, 2 plus 2 equals 4. 4 plus 4 equals 8. And you kind of start getting into that, growing their interest. That's probably a bad example. That's not really scaffolding, but you build on it where you end up, at the end, you learn something very different than they learned at the beginning. It kind of grows into something new, and you do it gradually and slowly. So in proximal development is meaning you teach them something, and then that leads to something else. So, for example, you're training your dog. You want your dog to roll over. First, you want to teach him to sit. Once he gets sit down, give him a treat. Then you teach him to lay down, and you give him a treat. Not all at once. This is maybe over a couple of weeks. Then they sit, and you sit, lay down, and you roll over. And so that's a proximal development. So each task is leading a little bit to the next task. Okay. So anyways, that kind of proximal development is kind of the idea that they have there. Home environment, home observation, measurement of the environment. Okay, so that's the home things. These just observation of parent-child relationship at home. So the more involved the parent is with the child is really what this is saying. Then the IQ scores tend to be higher. And they tend to have this if the mother has a higher IQ, which also leads to the infant having a higher IQ. There is so much evidence to show that if you read to a child when they're young, that they will enter school at a much higher level and their IQ will be influenced. Now, all of us genetically have certain range that we can go with our IQ. Certainly, if you read to them a lot, they're not going to be Einstein or whatever the IQ would be, 180 or whatever. And they may end up still being right about average, but they will move to that level quicker, and they will get there, and they'll have a better understanding in school. The sad thing again about single parents or parents that are really real busy taking care of way too many things may not take the time to sit down and read a book. That can take 10 minutes, but sometimes the parent's been working 12, 14 hours a day and comes home at night, and they're exhausted, and literally exhausted. And for them to do that is really a challenge. And some people can do it, or you can do it some days, not others, but more involved, the better, okay, from home. So low-income families, and this isn't because of IQ necessarily, it's because of the reading factors, because of the parents working, it's because of the home environment. You won't find as many books in lower income families, libraries, things like that at home. Um, and you might find even a less of a value of higher education or value of school. It might be, philosophy that C's get degrees. So, you just you can't pass a class. So great. Instead of trying to push them or encourage them to, I don't mean all A's. I think that can be almost as bad, if not as bad, but certainly to do as best they can and as well as they can with each class. Preschool programs helped out a lot. And that's why programs like, what is it? Anyway, there was a federally funded program that Head Start, that children went to in a preschool environment, and it was focused on the lower income areas, and it was trying to help young kids get that preschool development that certainly more affluent families have the ability to get. So the preschool programs can be a huge benefit in that. So touchscreens, these are new things that have come out in 2016. The smartphones, these are things that the lives are changing. So most teenagers will not leave home without their smartphones. Most adults won't. Actually, where teenagers learn it from, they learn it from the adults. And it's always funny for me when you'll have a mom or dad with a phone right there in their pocket or in their hand, and they'll say, these kids these days, you can't get them off their phones, and then they'll sit down. First thing they'll do, when they go out to a lunch with somebody, they'll look at their phone and check the emails or check something. It's something we've all done. It's not a bad thing, I don't think, as long as it doesn't control your life. And there's also some things that the adults can teach the young people about how to be effective with social media and phones without suffering some of the ill effects from it. So anyway, they're not bad. And we can go into social media and stuff later. I think there's real value to it, but it has to be done well. Otherwise, it can be a major problem in many ways. So media fan. It's sometimes it'd be some interesting time to set up a no technology rule for a half hour at home, and that might be at dinner. People take their phones to dinner, even at home. That might be right after dinner. It might be right before you go to bed. All technology is turned off, which could be TV as well, and it could be that's time to read a book or read a book to a child. But I think it's interesting to develop a no technology time or a zone that you want to do where all devices are turned off. Now here's an interesting one. How many of you have your phones on overnight? Certainly some of you do, and with it dings or buzzes or whatever, when you're trying to get to sleep, it's dying. You die to not go pick it up and see who sent something or who did something. So that's actually, it's a great idea. It's something that it probably has to be driven more when you're younger, older. By older, I mean 20s or so, when you've had a phone in your hand for 10 years. It's a bit harder. Those of us that are old, I used to work for Nokia, and when I was working for Nokia, we developed the first internet-based phone. It was called the Communicator, and it was something that used what we call WAP, Wireless Access Protocol. It was amazing how much those devices, now that cell phones, at the time Nokia was sold about half the cell phones in the world, but it was interesting how those phones were changing people's lives. And one thing I didn't like about working for Nokia is that we were expected to use that phone all the time, which meant that it had to be with us all the time and turned on. So it was like a big leash that every time that we go out to dinner or something like that, if I didn't answer the phone from my boss or something, it would get frowned upon. We were supposed to use the phones as much as possible. So anyway, whole other side story. But that was difficult. But it was kind of a cool place. I mean, spending a lot of time in Finland and places like that allowed me to experience. So these are other things that are kind of people when we talk about this right now. There's a whole thing about this. maybe I will at some point, but there's all kinds of social media issues that nothing's ever anonymous. Okay, nothing ever gets deleted. Even though things go away, like Vine used to be something after 6 seconds or 10 seconds, the video would go away. I'm not sure if TikTok has that or other actually um, um, Facebook bought Vine, so some of those are there. But even though you delete it, it's still there. It's still there. It's still discoverable. Even though you have a screen name and you go on some sites and you do stupid things, sometimes illegal things, they can still find you. You have your IP address and they can access that, and they can go to the exact phone or device that actually the information was shared on. And through the triangulation that the cell phones, we used to spend a lot of time on this, that cell phones know where you are all the time. If you're concerned about privacy, don't have a cell phone, because someone knows where you are all the time if you have a cell phone. And of course, you guys know that there's those apps that parents use sometimes that they put on your cell phone so they can track where you are. Of course, you can leave your app at your phone at somebody's house, okay? But then what's the use of having a phone if you're going to do that? So if you want a phone, someone's going to know where you are all the time. Doesn't matter whether you want it to or not. And even when you turn it off, do you even know it's turned off? How can you tell it's turned off other than the screen goes off? Is it still sending out messages? Is it still communicating with the cell towers? No, I don't know. That's something for you to think about. We used to at Nokia. We used to deal with that an awful lot. So anyway, that's the whole thing about that. But please be smart with that. Sexting or any of that kind of stuff. That's really, really dumb. There's many people who have lost jobs and lost scholarships and job applications and entrance to colleges on those kind of things. It's just as part of a frontal lobe thing. It's a good idea at the time, but it was really dumb to do. Anyway, got my soapbox and kind of move on here a little bit. Sorry about that. Television can be good. Television can do a lot of things. Sesame Street was a good example of that. It can teach different attitudes. It just has to be spent in an appropriate amount of time and appropriate shows. As I've said before, the violence on TV doesn't lead to violence in your home life. There's a lot of research that shows that, but it will lead to more aggressive behavior. Okay, so the difference between aggression and violence is when you actually intend to hurt somebody, hurt something. Okay, aggression is when you kind of bully someone, you walk down the hallway and knock their books out, in a school environment, or you just bump into people and kind of bullying people. That's the aggressive part, but that doesn't lead to violence necessarily, and video games as well. Okay, although a lot of parents will tend to believe that because it seems to make common sense. Okay, but there's no evidence it should. Television, Sesame Street was really good. Watching Couch Potato, there's so many kids that come home, especially latchkey kids. That's when there's no parents at home and they come in, especially late elementary school, hopefully not, but certainly middle school and high school. People come home, there's no parent there, and they just sit down and play a video game, or they just never leave there. That can certainly have some major effects in terms of the couch potato effect. Okay, let me go through this kind of quickly here, but knowledge is something that occurs just through the senses and interaction with the senses and bringing stuff into the aspect of memory. Okay, and it starts creating knowledge, and knowledge then leads to wisdom, which takes a little bit longer. But a lot of knowledge is, we're talking this age right now where they're really learning about things, okay, and experiencing things. And so the origins really start at age 3 is when they really start. Before that, they're kind of in this little bubble. But they start learning this appearance-related distinction, which is what real events are and mental events. So parents always say, well, they do that, and don't. Those TV shows that say don't do this at home. The most dangerous, the most violent things out there are cartoons. Think about the olden days. Go watch a Popeye cartoon. Go watch a Roadrunner cartoon. It's all about smashing, and then the person just pops up. Well, they start learning the difference, and that there's difference in real and mental. And most children, once they get through 7 or 8, can really understand the difference. They may play Batman, do that kind of stuff, but they understand that you're not going to fly. You're not going to put a cape on and fly. You can run around like you're going to. Your cape may fly up, but anyway, from 7 or 8, they start understanding the difference with that. So scripts are about, there's a way to do things, and we're used to doing things a certain way, and so we repeat those events over and over again. Those are what are called scripts. When you come to dinner, there's certain things that happen. When you get ready for school, you have a script that you're supposed to follow. At home is with your rules. Hopefully you've been able to do that. You go back in what's called the episodic memory, which is part of your long-term memory. Okay, and you go back and you specific events or episodes, and you react similarly, even if something's a little bit different. Okay, so that's part of that memory aspect. So rehearsal, well, we talked about these before in the past. I think you guys have had those, but memory strategy, you want to remember something, rehearse it, go over again. How many times we have a phone number someone gives us, it's 7 digits, or it could be 10 digits, and we repeat it over and over again in our brain until we can get it into our phone. Okay, certainly that happens a lot. Our brain is pretty good about 7 digits. Any more than that, it's a lot. Phones in general used to be only 7 digits. Okay, the area codes were always there, but like all of, let's say, Fayetteville, Rayford, Moore County could have all been one area code. So you didn't really have to tell people you were 910 or 919 or whatever. You just knew that, and so you only did 7 digits. So anyway, rehearsing. So language, why daddy go away? It's conjugation of verbs. It's all those kinds of things that occur. But so here's, the first they learn the words. They learn the words, and it's like those of you that had Jeannie the Wild Child, she knew how to say words, but she didn't know the syntax or the grammar to put together into a sentence. Then she started learning that, or then you start learning that there's the whole object assumption. This is when you start putting in adjectives, adverbs, objects, which like the and stuff like that. So now you have, the red dog jumped over the blue fence. Okay, and it makes more sense rather than this would be dog over fence. Okay. Then you start getting into some contrast. This is when you start getting into some ideas that red and blue can be different colors and can be assumed differently, or a fence being tall or short, maybe some contrast that might develop that you would be able to add to that. So now you start getting, this is more of a perceptual thing. This is kind of development of vocabulary that you get to that point. So this is application of regular grammar rules. Okay, so for irregular verbs and nouns, and so those are always difficult. I never was very good at those, and I went to Catholic school, and Sister Mary Adelaide was always upset at me about those things. So anyway, that's my memories, my traumas, I guess. But you have to understand that you need to understand that irregular verbs and nouns, they're just different. They're not outside the regular aspect of grammar rules. So asking questions is a big development. Not questions like where do I put my name, but a question that is really curiosity. Okay, that's something that's so important. I think we lose that early on, and they don't produce passive sentences. Okay, that's something that they're very much action oriented. They're very much so and so went, so and so did, that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's there. So communication in general. So PSY believe that in the idea of pragmatics, that this is kind of the adaptation language for the social situation. He believed that the cognitive development, the understanding of the social situation, had to occur first before you could modify your language. Okay, this might have something to do with emotional intelligence, things like that are going on, and it might be part of it, but it's a lot of it is about development. So he was really about the cognitive development needing to occur first before you could modify your language to fit the social situation. Okay, and then start putting things together based on that social situation. So you walk into a room, you develop the cognitive development, you're able to recognize what type of environment it is, and you might learn the word and apply it to the category that's already created. This is about code switching. This is about being able to walk into a room that's very formal and you talk formally. Yes, how are you today? And rather than, hey, what up, what up, and so that's kind of different, understanding where we are and doing that. It's also emotional intelligence is a big part of that too. Um, this is a long chapter. So Husky is something that you look at, but he really did made with sounds and vocalizations and stuff like that. Is important. I don't know he's a big part of this chapter, but he will be someone later. So here's all the terms. Probably not having to get into all of them necessarily, but certainly you should be able to go through and have some sense that, I think they're kind of in the order of the chapter. Okay. Um, so if you're looking for something in the chapter, you can go through here and say, okay, scaffolding, and then goes here. It's about a little over halfway through the chapter. Okay, you can go back to that, and then next will be some summaries, and you can go um, do that as well. Okay, so that's that chapter. If you have any questions, I know I went through it really quickly. I'll try to keep all these under an hour. I'm not sure I did with this one, but anyway, get a hold of me on email, on Remind, and or on we can set up something on Zoom where we can sit and talk about a certain thing, especially when we start getting into the final projects that may tie into some of the stuff that's on here. So anyway, that's it for today. Have a great day.